Welcome to the introduction to the Airdrie Way and how you can implement in your home to promote positive behaviors and skills with your children and your youth. I'm Dr. Yadira Flores, an educational psychologist and mother of two teenagers. Let's begin with an overview. You may be asking yourself, what is the Airdrie Way? The Airdrie Way is a set of consistent expectations and rules for appropriate youth behavior across our community. This was created by a group of stakeholders in the city of Airdrie, representing organizations, facilities, and spaces. And it's based on an evidence-based system that's implemented worldwide for over 25 years. In fact, many of the schools in the Rocky View School District implement this system. Let's talk about the Airdrie Way. Community members got together to identify expectations and values that they wanted to establish and teach to support the needs of the youth within the community. And they identified three. They identified how to be respectful, to be responsible, and to be safe. And they identify specific skills of what those will look like in the different areas of the environment in the community. They identify that being respectful is to use positive language. They identify that being responsible is to report problems to staff. And that being safe is to respect personal space. You will notice that the skills or the rules are stated in a positive way. What that means is indicating what do they want youth to be able to do and demonstrate within the community. So it's another way of saying we don't want youth to cuss or say unkind things. Instead, we want them to be respectful and use positive language. We don't want youth in the community to be pushing each other or hitting each other or shoving each other. Instead, we want them to be safe and respect personal space. So really focusing and developing those values, expectations, and the things we want our youth to be able to demonstrate in order to create a supportive and safe community for our youth. So why is it needed? The city asked through a survey, and the youth reported experiencing violence and crime. 98% of Airdrie youth surveyed indicated that violence and bullying were problems in Airdrie. So based on this data, the city responded by gathering the community and creating the Airdrie Way to prevent and address these concerns while creating a positive, proactive, and safe community for our youth. The Airdrie Way gives adults strategies and tools to maintain clear and consistent expectations across all locations, and not only for our youth, but for our young children as well. And these expectations are able to hold our youth accountable, and we're able to create predictable environments. These expectations are currently being taught and reinforced across all supervised locations in our community. In fact, the city created posters and they posted it all over the community as visual prompts and reminders to our youth and our children of the values and expectations in our community. How can it help you? The Airdrie Way isn't just for the city or for the schools. It can also be used in your home with your family. What we know is that when we create these type of expectations and we teach them and we acknowledge them, we're able to share a common language with our communities and possibly with the schools that your children and your youth attends. We're able to really teach them routines, values, and norms. We're able to increase positive behaviors and skills. And another great benefit is that it provides a growth and improvement in positive relationships. We're able to have a calmer, safer home space. We're able to communicate more clearly with each other. We're able to problem solve, and it really helps build those strong bonds. And I have to say, I have used this system in my home, and it makes the home environment more fun. We laugh more. We enjoy each other more. We're focusing on all the positive behaviors and interactions that we're having, and not so much on all the mistakes and inappropriate behaviors that we used to have in the past. We're able to create more predictable systems and routines in ways to address the supports and the needs and the development of our youth and our children. We want to thank all the different organizations, facilities, and spaces that came together in the city of Airdrie to help create spaces and environments for our children and our youth that are proactive, preventative, supportive, and safe. And now I'm going to ask you to pause the video, take a few minutes to reflect on what you have heard, and think about these questions. What is the Airdrie Way? Why is it needed in our city and community? And how can it help at home? Go ahead and pause the video now. Welcome back. Now let's talk about how you can implement the Airdrie Way in your home by creating, teaching, and reinforcing expectations in the home. There are a number of components that we need to plan for in order to implement the Airdrie Way in your home. The first one is creating those expectations with your family, establishing a way to teach and describe those skills, and acknowledging and reinforcing when your children and your youth demonstrate those expectations. Because what we know is that when we acknowledge behavior, that behavior is more likely to be maintained or increased, and that is what we want. And also talking about how are we going to hold our kids accountable when they make mistakes. So let's go ahead and get started with the first component. To create the home expectations, you want to gather everybody in your family, and you want to start talking about what would respectful look like in our home. What would it look like to be responsible? What would it look like to be safe? Because remember that respectful, responsible, and safe are the expectations that have been identified in the community and in the city of Airdrie. So you want to go ahead and use the same expectations in your home, but you want to have conversations and ask, what does it look like in our home? You may provide some examples. Respectful means listening when somebody is talking or waiting for your turn. So give them some ideas, but then have everybody provide input and share ideas. You can have a poster with making a list or a piece of paper that you have somebody in the family take notes and start identifying what those look like. Remember that you want to make sure that it's stated in a positive way. That means, what does the behavior look like? So if you don't want them to run in the house, that means you want them to walk. If you don't want them to hit, you want them to keep their hands to themselves. And it is okay to repeat skills across different expectations and locations, because sometimes the same skill is needed in multiple places, and that may be something that it's important for your family. I also want to remind you that you want to be realistic. That means that sometimes we think of all these different skills that we want to teach in our home and that we expect, but we don't want to have so many that it's going to be so difficult for your children and your youth, or even yourself, to remember what they are. So we want to walk you through some of the criteria that we're going to recommend. We want to make sure that you're thinking about not just the expectations and what they look like, but that you want to identify a few locations in your home or routines in your home that you want to focus on. Maybe around 4 to start with. And then you want to identify 2 skills under each location or routine under each expectation. That way you don't have so many skills that it's difficult to remember. So let me walk you through what we call the expectation matrix. What we do is we list the expectations on top. You see the respectful, responsible, and safe. You want to keep those. But then as a family, you want to identify locations. How do you do that? Maybe you think about where you're having the biggest challenges. Is it the routine of before and after school? Is it bedtime? Is it in a particular location of your home? Once you identify the locations, then you want to talk about what would that look like if it's showing respectful or responsible or safe. Let me walk you through this. Let's say the one of the routines that is difficult in your home or that you want to make sure that we have specific routines and skills is before and after school. You would ask things like, let's talk about what would respectful look like before and after school. Here are some examples for you. You may say something like, keep clean. And we're talking about body, breath, and bedroom. What does that really mean? What that means is you want to make sure that your youth and your children are taking showers, right? Keeping your body clean, that they're brushing their teeth, and that they're keeping their bedroom clean. You're also thinking about what would it look like to be responsible. It may be completing homework before screen time. That means we come home, we do our homework, and then we could be on our phones or playing video games. You think about and ask, what would it look like to be safe? I want to give you some tips. Initially, when you have this conversation as a family, the first thing that's going to come up, it's things that we don't want, right? And we kind of talked a little bit about how important it is to state it in a positive way, because that is the way that we can teach and acknowledge the behaviors that we want to see. But naturally, your children or your youth may say things like, well, I think you don't want us to jump on the sofas. True. So what would it look like? I don't think you want us to fight. Yes, I don't want you to fight. So what would it look like? That may be sitting appropriately on the sofa or keeping feet, hands, and objects to self. That means you don't throw things, you don't punch, you don't kick. So you may need to start modeling that as you create this with your children. Then what you do is you go to the next one. You identify another location or another routine. In this example, you see that we selected the kitchen. This is where a lot of families spend a lot of time, getting together in the kitchen to have dinner or to have breakfast or lunch. So this may be a good location to target. And then you do the same thing. You go through, what would it look like to be respectful in the kitchen? What would it look like to be responsible in the kitchen? What would it look like to be safe? And you notice here that we use the same skill multiple times, like use positive language. And that is okay, because maybe in your family, it's going to be really important that we emphasize that in every location. But you'll also notice that we make sure that that skill, even though it's repeated, it's under the same expectation, that is under respectful. That is important because you're going to be connecting skills to expectations. It's going to be easier to teach, it's going to be easier to remember, and it's going to be easier to acknowledge. So let's go through some of the examples. Maybe being respectful is cell phones away during meals. You know what that means. That means no phones on the table. That means not, scrolling or posting while we're having dinner. But this is a positive way to let them know that what it looks like is that cell phones are away during the meals. Maybe being safe, you talk as a family and say, washing hands before handling food. These are things that you can discuss as a family, brainstorm. Maybe you have a whole list and then you vote on, we need to pick two that we want to focus on. And then you continue on to the next location, maybe the family room, maybe things that you do on the weekends. Or like I said, for my children, one of the big focuses, especially when they were younger, was nighttime routine, because that was the most difficult for us. They were super excited. They were not ready to go to bed. It would take us forever to get them ready. And so we created this matrix and make sure that we had nighttime routine. So these are things that you maybe want to think about first and suggest as a family and discuss. And then you can talk about, what does it look like? How do we state it in a positive way? and then do we need to repeat it at different locations? And really focus on creating this matrix as a family. One thing that's important about creating as a family is when we give our children and youth a voice and they have input into what those skills look like in our home, they are more willing to follow it because they're part of this. They created this. So we want to make sure that you create the time, block out those days and have these conversations and make a visual list of them and have them vote. And ultimately, you'll be the one to finish it and finalize it. And you can pick what are the most important skills that we want to focus on and create. After you have created the expectation matrix with the different locations and the specific skills with your family, the next thing we need to do is develop a teaching system. It's really important to have a plan on how we're going to teach these skills and these expectations because behaviors are skills that need to be taught, that need to be modeled, that need to be acknowledged, that need to be corrected. And we teach, just like we've taught our children, a number of different skills, like how we teach tying shoes, how we taught our children to ride a bike, how to read, and how to drive. We didn't just say, get on the bike, and they just learn how to ride a bike. We didn't just give them the key and a car and say, get in it and drive. We had to provide teaching, time to practice, modeling, acknowledging when they did well, and correcting when they made a mistake. So we want to plan a system like that for these skills. So we start with posting those expectations. Remember we talked that the city of Airdrie created posters and posted the posters around the community as a visual prompt. So it's a great way to teach, to be a visual prompt and be able to be reminded of the expectations. So that's step one. So what you want to do as a family, once you have your matrix, is have a plan on how we're going to post them around our house. What you want to do is either type it and print it and post it on a wall in the location of the expectation. So for example, you may print something in the kitchen because the expectations are for the kitchen or the family room or the bedroom or the bathroom, depending on the location. So you want to post it in the location of the expectations and skills. Another fun thing you can do, and this is what I did with my children, was we had a day where as a family, we created our own posters. I got markers and crayons and some poster boards, and we were able to create and write those expectations by having the locations. We would just go ahead and add the title kitchen, and then we would have respectful, responsible, safe, and then we would identify the specific skills under that expectation and the location. And you could frame it and post it, or you could just tape it to the wall, but it's a great visual reminder that you can use as a guide, not only for your children and youth, but for yourself to remember what those are. Then the next step is discussing, providing examples of what those skills look like. So let's say that you want to review with your children that being responsible is cleaning their room. Instead of just saying, clean your room, we want to show them and teach them what does it mean to be clean. I don't know about you, but sometimes our expectations are different than our children. I've told my kids to clean their room and I come in and it's definitely not clean, but they think it's clean. So what we want to do is show them and teach them what do we mean by clean. So in this example, you may want to come into their bedroom and share with them that clean means, no toys on the floor, or we don't want to have clothes and shoes and socks spread in the floor. We want to make sure that our bed is done. That means the comforter is on, the pillows are on the bed. It also may mean no dirty dishes or cups on the counter or on the floor or in anywhere in the bedroom. So then you tell them, you explain, and then you model. Okay, now let's clean the room. And then you show them, you put the toys here, you put the clothes in the hamper. This is how you do the bed. Let's check, are there any dirty dishes? And when you're done, take a picture of that bedroom and post it in the room and say, this is what it means to be clean. That way we ensure that they understand what having a clean room looks like. They have a model of what that looks like. And then we can acknowledge them when they show that they know what it means to clean the room. And then we also want to provide non-examples to emphasize the room is not clean when there's toys on the floor, when there's clothes on the floor, when there's dirty dishes, and when the bed's not done. So that way they know, what does it mean to be clean? And what are some non-examples when it's not clean? And then we link it back to the expectation. Remember, the expectation is to be responsible by cleaning your room, and you're walking them through those examples and non-examples. And then have them model. Okay, now you show me, what does it look like when your room is clean? And I know you may think that's going to take so much time to teach all these skills. And it does take time. So you can plan, maybe we're going to teach a location per day over 1 week. Or do we want to teach an expectation per day across 1 week? And then chunk it and talk about it. And even though it takes some time, it's going to save so much time later, because your children and youth will be able to self-manage. They'll know what you expect. They'll be able to become more independent and do it on their own. So that is a plan for teaching. The next thing we want to plan is, how are we going to acknowledge our children when they demonstrate the expectation and the skill that we identified as being important for our family? It's important to acknowledge, because what we know is that when we acknowledge and reinforce skills, those skills are more likely to occur in the future. They either get maintained or increase, and that is what we want. We want those skills that we're teaching to be repeated in the future. That is how we learn skills. So it's similar to getting a paycheck or getting a good grade in school. Those things are earned by meeting and demonstrating those expectations. So we want to make sure we have a system where every time we see our children demonstrating those skills, that we acknowledge them so that we can increase those skills. And let me give you some ideas. In the city of Airdrie, they decided to use a ticket system. So they created tickets where the community uses to give to youth and children every time they demonstrate those skills in those posters, to show them that that is the right way. That is the right way to show respect, to show that you're safe, to show that you're being responsible. And maybe the schools that your children go to also have a ticket system where, when teachers and adults see your children demonstrating those expectations and skills, they acknowledge them by giving them tickets. You could also use tickets by maybe, ordering some business cards and putting your own expectations, but you could also use stickers and tokens. But let me tell you why this is important. Having something tangible helps the adults get reminded that we need to catch them showing and demonstrating those expectations. So it's a great visual reminder. If I have stickers or tokens or marbles in my pocket, I know that I'm looking for opportunities to acknowledge the youth and my children and make sure that I increase those skills. Also, it helps build connections, because it gives you opportunity to connect in a positive way. And it helps remind children of the expectation as well as ourselves. I'm going to give you a number of examples of what you can use as a visual prompt for yourself to acknowledge the skills and the expectations that our children are demonstrating based on our matrix that we created together. But I want to emphasize one thing. We talked about using tickets or tokens or stickers to acknowledge them. But what's going to be really important is that verbal reinforcement. That means letting them know why they're being acknowledged. So you want to make sure that you state the expectation, state the skill, and then you can use stickers or tickets to let them know that that is what we want them to do, to go ahead and continue that skill. So for example, if your child pick up their dirty dishes and put them in the sink, which is one of the skills that you guys agreed was important and that was being responsible, you can say, thank you for being responsible and picking up your dirty dishes and putting them in the sink. And then you can give the sticker or you can give the ticket. So now let's talk about different ways we can acknowledge our children. So if you're going to use stickers, you want to create some kind of visual chart where you list the skills. And when your child or youth demonstrates those skills, then you can go ahead and put a sticker next to it. I did this for my daughter with her nighttime routine. So she had 3 skills that she needed to demonstrate to be responsible during bedtime. And that was brush her teeth, put on her pajamas, and get to bed. So I created that visual chart and I indicated those 3 skills under being responsible. During bedtime routine, when she went ahead and brushed her teeth, then she would get a sticker for brushing the teeth. When she put on her pajamas, she got another sticker. When she went to bed, she got another sticker. And we talked about our criteria. That means that you needed this amount of stickers at the end of the week in order for her to exchange it for something in the treasure box. You know, where I put in her favorite snacks or crayons or markers or pens. And that's something you can decide as a family. And we'll talk a little bit more on how we come up a list of privileges they can earn, right? Now, let's say you have your youth and you're like, I don't want to use stickers with youth. Although, let me tell you, they also like stickers. But another thing you can do is use tallies. And every time you see your youth demonstrating that skill, you add a tally. And then you can talk about our criteria. You know, if you get 60% of the tallies for the week or 70% of the tallies of the week, you can go ahead and earn some privileges based on a list that you created with your children and agreed upon. You could also use marbles. So one way to do it is you can create a jar or have a jar for each of your children with their names on it. And every time you see them demonstrating a skill, you can add a marble to their jar. And it's a nice visual because they can see how many marbles they're getting, right? You can use nuts and bolts. You can use poker chips. You can use tickets like the schools in the community is using, right? And then in that way, what you could do is have them exchange them for some privileges. So you can say, for every 10 poker chips, you can pick up something from your list of privileges. Or for every 10 tickets, or this is what many schools do, you can have a family raffle and everybody gets their tickets in there and you can pick a ticket where they get to pick the movie of the week for the family or a special dish that we're going to cook together as a family. But first, you need to think about, what am I going to use to remind myself or the adults in my family to acknowledge our children and youth when they're demonstrating the skills that we want to increase or maintain. Once you have identified whether you're going to use stickers or marbles or poker chips or tallies, then the next thing is creating the reinforcement system. And this is something that you create and talk about with your family as well. You can talk about every time we catch our, that is the daily, because it's really important in order to increase and maintain skills that we acknowledge them immediately after the behavior happens. And we want to be specific. We want to let them know why they got it. Thank you for being safe by keeping your hands to yourself. Thank you for being responsible by picking up your dirty dishes. And so then we're going to go ahead and add that marble and connect the expectation skill with the marble. And then we talk as a family, what are we going to do with all those marbles at the end of the week? Or what are we going to do with all the stickers at the end of the week? Then you can talk about your weekly plan. In the example of the marbles, maybe you have a bigger family to meet our goal line. Then we get to do something fun as a family. And you can make a list of those things. Like I said, we can have a movie night. We can have a special meal. We can play a board game, go out for a walk, or go to a picnic. You can decide as a family, what are some things that the family can earn when we all show those skills daily that accumulate to the marbles at the weekly jar. You could also have discussions. What are we going to do with all those marbles or stickers or tickets at the end of the week? Maybe we count them, and if we have a certain amount, then we get to do something monthly, something a little bit more special, something a little bigger, something more involved. But really, is looking at privileges for your children and activities as a family. Sometimes your children may want to go to bedtime an hour later. Just make sure that you have the rules for you to say you can go ahead and claim your coupon for going to sleep an hour later, but it can only be used on the weekends, right? So you create the rules, you identify what they can earn and what those things look like, what is doable for your family, and then they get to pick from that list with your guidance. So again, you want to create a system of how we're going to acknowledge every time those skills are demonstrated, and then at the end of the week, and then at the end of the month. These layers are very effective in changing behavior. What you're going to notice is many more positive behaviors and skills at home, a lot more positive interactions, a lot more fun, but also less behavior problems, less challenges, less conflict, and less stress. By creating the expectations and developing a teaching system and establishing a way to acknowledge and provide positive feedback for our children and teen, we're going to be proactive and preventative. We're going to reduce the likelihood that our children are going to demonstrate the unexpected behavior. That is, being disrespectful or irresponsible or unsafe. We're going to be able to establish a system that supports the values and the skills that they need to be successful at home. But they're going to make mistakes. And so we want to be proactive and plan what we called an accountability system or a discipline system. What are we going to do when our children and youth make mistakes? What are we going to do when they're not demonstrating those expectations? We want to make sure that we address those behaviors in a way that is consistent. That means that we respond in a way, the same way every time. That it's predictable, that our children are going to know what to expect when they're not following those expectations, when they're being unsafe, pushing each other, when they're being irresponsible and not cleaning their room, where they're being disrespectful and not following directions. We also want to make sure that in our system we're being equitable. What I mean by equitable means that everyone in the family who doesn't follow those expectations is going to receive the same response, the same type of correction. And the goal and the purpose of this accountability system is to teach them what to do differently next time and make sure that they're set up to be able to follow those values and have the skills that they need to be successful. So what does that look like? So let's say our teen or our child is not following those expectations. They're being unsafe and pushing each other. Or something that's very common with teens, they're not being responsible by cleaning their room. So you want to make sure that you refer them back to the expectation. Remind them, what does it look like to be responsible in the bedroom? Remember, being responsible looks like this, right? So you want to refer back to the expectation and provide an opportunity to teach. So let's go over a couple of examples. Teen is not cleaning their room. What we want to do is go to that location and remind them, remember, being responsible is cleaning your room. Let's go over what does it look like to clean your room and kind of go over those skills and then ask, so what does it look like to be responsible in your room? And then you can tell them, being responsible in your room is having it clean. That means no toys on the floor, no clothes on the floor, your bed is made. And then as soon as your teen engages in cleaning the room and picks up the toys and the clothes and makes the bed, You want to use it as an opportunity to reinforce and acknowledge and letting them know, thank you for cleaning your room. That's being responsible. It's really important to do that because, again, the reinforcement and the acknowledgement is going to strengthen that skill. Let's say you have a child who continues to push his little brother, and you want to remind them and refer back to the expectation and use it as an opportunity to learn. Ask them, what does it look like to be safe in the living room? And then you can tell them, remember, being safe in the living room is keeping your hands, feet, and objects to self. And then you can walk them through some of the skills and provide those examples. As soon as your child keeps their hands to themselves, is no longer pushing their little brother or little sibling, then you want to use as an opportunity to acknowledge. Thank you for being safe by keeping your hands, feet, and objects to yourself. That is being safe in the living room. This is a great way to correct behaviors, acknowledge when they change their behavior, and set them up for success so that they know what to do next time. Now I'm going to give you some time to pause this video. Take a moment to think about, what are our home expectations? Is everyone in the family aware of these expectations? Are they able to perform and demonstrate those expectations at home? Think also about, how can I teach and acknowledge when my teens and my children demonstrate those expectations at home? How do I let them know that that is the correct way to behave at home, that that meets our values and our home expectations? And when they make mistakes, how do I hold my children accountable in a way that corrects them and teaches them what they should do differently next time? Welcome back. We are almost at the end. Now we're going to talk about next steps. What do we do next to implement the Airdrie Way in our home? Remember these? These are the different components of what is needed to create the Airdrie Way in your home. Creating the expectations as a family, a teaching system, developing an acknowledgement system, and holding our kids accountable through a proactive correctional system that focuses on teaching. And we're going to provide you some strategies, some tools, and a template. You will be able to access these templates in the City of Airdrie website. Go ahead and download and use to create those expectations and identify locations and create your home expectation matrix. You will notice that you'll have an example with a criteria. It will walk you through how many expectations, locations, and rules to have. You'll be able to use the Airdrie Way expectations of being respectful, being responsible, and being safe. And then it gives you some examples of skills that we went over during this video. But you'll notice at the bottom, there'll be a blank template. That's the one that you can use with your family and create for your own home. You'll notice that there's some suggested routines and locations, but you can change those and you can use your own locations and your own routines that you want to focus on and be able to go ahead and write the different skills that your family agrees to focus on based on those expectations and the locations in your home. You will also have access to a template to help develop your reinforcement acknowledgement system. So you'll notice that the first part is an example of the daily, weekly, and monthly. And then you have a blank one that you can use with your family to go ahead and create what you're going to use daily to acknowledge when the expectations and behaviors are demonstrated. What are you going to do weekly? And what are you going to do monthly? So these things are going to help you to create your system. Again, my name is Dr. Yadira Flores. I'm an educational psychologist, mother of two teenagers who has used this system for many, many years. I know how effective it is, how it can create an environment that is proactive, positive, where we focus on acknowledging each other when we're demonstrating the skills and the values of our family, and when we can focus on correcting and teaching when we make mistakes. We create an environment that is fun, that it's calm, where we enjoy each other, where there's less conflict, less stress, and just more joy. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with you about the Airdrie Way, the reason why the city of Airdrie got together to create this system in the community, to be proactive and support youth, and to be able to walk you through how you can implement this system in your home with some of the templates that we provided that you can download from the website. Take care.